Yesterday we were talking about dictatorships, right? And we got through this. I don't know if you can recognize some of these picked photographs. You guys know who this guy is? In the middle? No? That's Fidel Castro. Of what? Communist dictator of what country? Cuba, yeah. 1959, okay? Now, I think he's still alive, but he's not in control of Cuba anymore. His brother is, named Raul Castro, okay? Okay, and then Hitler's on the bottom right there, okay? So, guys, remember, when we talk about dictatorships, you have a dictator ruled by one, or a small group, which is actually called an oligarchy. Okay, so rule by one, auto being one, okay, rule by one, could be a monarchy, like the king of Saudi Arabia, okay, or it could be like a military dictator like Adolf Hitler, or a communist dictator like Joseph Stalin, okay. Today, you guys know what flag this is? The Chinese flag, okay? Now, you guys know the Chinese call themselves communists, right? And their leader is a guy named Xi Jinping, okay? Now, in China, they have an oligarchy. So you have almost 1.4 billion people, right, in China. But only a very small number of the Chinese people are members of the Communist Party. So membership in the Communist Party has its advantages in China, for sure. You understand? They get to elect the president. And President Xi is very popular. And so is his wife. And so something happened in China last year that hadn't happened since their first communist leader, which was Mao Zedong, is that they made President Xi president for life. Okay, so if you go back after Mao died, who was revered in China to this day, they had a succession of leaders that were chosen by the Communist Party. So it is the Communist Party that rules China. So that would be an oligarchy. That makes sense. Okay. Now, since Xi has been named president for life, it almost turns back towards an autocracy. Okay, because they promise not to get rid of him or have new elections because he is so beloved. Okay, and so you can see almost a shift from an oligarchy to an autocracy. Okay, now all of these dictatorships are authoritarian by their very nature, meaning that they answer only to themselves. Okay, they don't answer to the people. They don't answer to God. They don't answer to anybody. They answer to themselves. Okay, so that's what authoritarian means. All right. So in extreme cases, dictatorships can be called totalitarian or totalitarianistic, okay, which is complete control in every aspect of life through force or ruling with an iron fist, okay? And probably the best example of that today is North Korea, right? Kim Jong-un, all right? It's a military dictatorship. He controls everything. People starve to death in his country. The food that they give to their military. And so they control everything. So there's no freedom of information. There's no freedom of speech. There's no freedom of religion. Okay, everything is controlled. Okay, so if you are unfortunate to be born in North Korea today, the only thing you will ever hear in the news or on the radio, even if you have one of those things, fortunate enough to have a TV, would come from the government. Government controls all information. Okay, so you don't know any different than what the government tells you. You know what I mean? It's horrible for those people. Myanmar, which is formerly known as Burma, okay, is also one of the most oppressive societies in the world. It's over here. If you're at India and you take a right, here's Myanmar. Okay, they did have some progress there a few years ago. They elected a woman that kind of tried to reform the system, but then it fell back into a bad situation there. Okay. Of course, Nazi Germany is a good example of a totalitarian government. Okay. So these are all examples of dictatorships. Being able to differentiate between, a single dictator and a small group is important. Okay, just for the test and so forth. So this is based on like the number of people that can participate. And so if you go to the opposite of that, you would get a democracy where the people rule. Okay. Now we're going to change how we look at government for a minute here. Okay. And we're going to look at governments based on where the power lies in the government. Okay. At the national, regional, or state level and the local level. Okay. So the first one we're going to look at is a unitary system. All right. Most countries in the world use this. We don't use this. Okay. But most countries do. Ones that, we're kind of familiar with. You got Britain, Japan, Israel. Okay, that's what that looks like. All right, so it's a top-down approach to government. So all decisions are made by the national government. So let me give you an example. So for instance, in Wichita, Kansas, who's the highest elected government official in Wichita, Kansas? What's that position called? The city of Wichita, who's the head of our city? The mayor. Okay. Now, locally in our system, we elect the mayor, and the mayor works with the city council, okay, to do things like the new stadium downtown, right? The new baseball stadium. They tore down Lawrence Dumont Stadium, built the Riverfront Stadium, yes? So they made that decision, and then they put it to a vote for the people of Wichita to decide whether we wanted to spend all this money to do it, okay? And that's done at the local level. Washington, D.C. has no say in that. But in a unitary system, if they wanted to build a stadium in a local city, that decision would come from the national government, not from the locally elected mayor. So in Britain, okay, if you're in London, yes, you have a mayor. In fact, the mayor of London today is called Mayor Khan, is his name. Okay, he takes his directives from the national government. And if you have a governor of a region or a state, they take their directives from the national government. So the big unit is the national government, yes? So think big unit, unitary system, they make all the decisions. Now, guys, we are trending in that direction. The United States is. But our Constitution won't let it happen. So when Joe Biden wanted to do the mandate for vaccines, that anybody that had more than 100 employees, their employees had to be vaccinated or be tested every week. The Supreme Court said, no, you can't do that. This isn't a unitary system. Okay, it's not a top-down approach. Follow me? So the Constitution helps prevent us from becoming this. All right? Now, I know there's a lot of smart people in Washington, D.C., and I know out here in Kansas, we're a bunch of hayseeds and hicks, okay, and we're not very smart out here. A lot of us didn't go to Ivy League schools, okay, but we do know how to run a government in Kansas, okay? The people of Texas know how to run a government. The people of Utah know how to run a government. We don't need to be directed by a small group of people in Washington, D.C., do we? Now, some people would like that, okay? I don't. All right, so that's a unitary system. Now, what we use, guys, is a federal system. So it looks more like this. So you notice on the first slide, guys, how big the boxes are, right? And then you come to this slide, and the boxes are the same size. All right? So we use what's called federalism. All right? Y'all heard of federalism before? Okay? This is one that you need to memorize. Okay? Federalism is the sharing or division of power between national, state, and local government. Okay? This is something we use and you need to understand. Okay? Some powers are unique to each level, and some powers they share. We talk about there's federal courts, yes? And then there's state and local courts, yes? That's a power we both do. You have the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, yes? And then you have the local police force. And you have state troopers, right? So these are things that all three levels do. Is there a federal or a national fire department? I don't think there is. You know what I mean? So that's something that's handled at the local level, fire departments. We don't have a state fire department either. It's a local organization. Everybody with me on that? So those are powers that are shared, and a lot of times we refer to those as concurrent powers. Concurrent powers, okay? Now there are some that are unique. So the national government is the only one that can print money. Kansas can't print its own money. Can you imagine if every state printed their own money? That would be chaotic, right? So in the Constitution, guys, it lays out the powers of the national government, what powers they have. And they also say in here that states cannot coin their own money. So it denies that power. Can Kansas declare war on Canada? We may want to, but we can't. Okay? Only who can declare war? The Congress, the U.S. Congress. So only the national government can do that. You follow me? Now, we have a lot of fights over this. In fact, many of the fights that we have in Washington, D.C. are over this. Okay, I was just reading this morning. I don't know if you guys heard about the Texas abortion law. The Texas abortion law says after 6 weeks, and I believe that's when, you have the heartbeat, yes, you cannot get an abortion in Texas. Okay, does that violate the Supreme Court's precedents in Roe v. Wade that guarantees the right for a person to have an abortion? Well, they can have an abortion. They just got to do it in the first 6 weeks. Okay, and the Supreme Court yesterday refused to hear the case, which means that law in Texas stands at this point. Okay, the Mississippi law that is being looked at by the Supreme Court right now, and I think theirs is more like 16 weeks. So it's kind of interesting how that plays out. Okay, now one of the examples I really like to use here, guys, is education. Okay, nowhere in the Constitution does the word education appear. Okay, so if it's not a power, public education is not a power given to the national government. Not mentioned. So who has the power to be in control of public education? If it's not given to the national government. These two, right? Now, you've all heard of the Bill of Rights. Yes? The first 10 amendments. Okay? Well, the 10th Amendment says this. Those powers not granted to the national government, nor denied to the states, are reserved to the states or to the people, which is local government. Okay? So, for 200 years, guys, this country survived without a United States Department of Education. The national government had nothing to do with education. And then in 1977, they created the U.S. Department of Education in Washington, D.C. Okay? Why? They have no authority in the Constitution. Do you know how many people work for the U.S. Department of Education in Washington, D.C.? Like over 40,000 people. And we have to pay all those people's salaries. Now, does the national government get to dictate what I'm teaching you right now? No. But you know what the national government does dictate? That states assess their students in the 3rd grade, in the 8th grade, and the 11th grade. And so your whole freaking life, and everybody has to test. We do what do you call it? State assessment test. That's mandated from the federal government. Follow me? But they have no say constitutionally. Now, you guys know we have a $30 trillion national debt. Yes? 30 trillion. This last year, 2021, the U.S. government took in $4 trillion in taxes, which is the most our government has ever taken in, $4 trillion. All right? But it's spent $7 trillion. Which means, so if you ever want to balance the budget, like you're trying to balance your checkbook, you either got to cut your spending or raise revenue. Yes? More taxes. Yes? Or a combination. See, the thing is, guys, when our government creates an agency, they usually create it, anytime there's a problem, they say, well, we need to create an agency to tackle that problem. But these agencies never go away. Now, how much money does the federal government spend on education? About 7 or 8% of all the funding for public schools comes from the national government. About 90% of the paperwork comes from the national government. You follow me on this? Now, if you want to cut something in Washington, D.C., to shrink spending so we can balance a budget, this is where I would start, is the U.S. Department of Education. Okay? Just get rid of it. Now, you can keep the funding, but those 40,000 employees that all have good salaries and good pensions are expensive. And after we get rid of the U.S. Department of Education, let's just go ahead and get rid of the U.S. Department of Energy. Because we survived in this country for 200 years without a U.S. Department of Energy. Why do we need that? Okay, so you've got to think about this, guys. Our government just keeps growing and growing and growing. And you're never going to balance a budget. Now, we looked this up in honors class, 4th hour yesterday, okay? Okay, you guys know Hannah Allman. You know that person? Okay, so she looked this up. And we looked up the net worth of all the billionaires in the United States. Okay? The net worth, $4.4 trillion. So your Bill Gates, Elon Musk, $4.4 billion. Okay, so we had a $3 billion deficit this year. So you could tax the rich. In fact, you could take everything, okay, from these rich people, and you could balance the budget with that. But what are you going to do next year? Because you just took all their money. Okay? There's not enough, you can't tax the rich enough to cover the amount of debt that we're having each year. You follow me? So you've got to cut. Where are you going to cut? You're going to cut Social Security? You're going to cut Medicare? Medicaid? That encompasses 60% of all the spending, those 3 programs. They're called entitlement programs. And then about 20%, 18 to 20%, we spend on the military. Okay, now you're down to about 20% of the entire budget that you can look at maybe cutting. Discretionary spending is what they call it, is about 6 to 8%, because you know what we have to do every year is pay interest on the national debt, which consumes about 8% of the budget. So when you start talking about cutting, it's a very small piece of pie that you can cut. You can cut the military spending some, okay? And we have at times, okay? You have to look at these programs and say, okay, what is wasteful? What can we get rid of? Okay. So, when it comes to education, the national government has no role, but they're doing it anyway. Okay, and I see that as a problem. I went to public schools. You can probably tell. Okay. In 3 different states. I went to elementary school in Illinois, middle school and part of high school in Indiana, my last year and a half of high school in Florida. My GPA, when I moved from Indiana to Florida, went up 1.5 points, which tells you it was low to begin with. Yes? Now, if you're at Wichita South High, you drive 10 miles east to Andover High, you get a difference in education? Yeah. The federal government can't fix that. Okay? The federal funding comes for things like special ed and free and reduced lunches. That's where most of the federal money goes. Actually, it's just free lunches now. No reduced lunch is just free for everybody. What are we doing? Stucky, can your parents afford to feed you? Do you eat the lunches here? Is that wasteful? Are we driving up the national debt to feed you that your parents can afford to feed you? Is this stupid or what? It's insane. Now, if you have families that struggle and you want to do free and reduced lunches for those folks, that's different. But doing it for people that can afford it is stupid. It's a waste. And you know that $30 trillion in debt, yes. You know who's going to pay for that? Your kids that aren't even born yet. Your grandkids that aren't even born yet. They're paying for this. Thomas Jefferson said this. He said, when we leave this planet, and from our country, we should leave it better off than when we got here. My generation and the baby boomers ahead of us, older than me, they're screwing you guys. Didn't mean to depress you this morning. But if there's any reason to pay attention to what's going on with our government, guys, it's that. You understand? Federalism. I reserve the right, here on out. You walk in here, to ask you, Mary Jo, define federalism. Sharing or division of power between national, state, and local governments. Okay, it's what we use. Most Americans don't even know what it frickin' is. All right, and if you don't know what it is it easy to take it away? So Joe Biden can say, I can do whatever I want. I have the power. The national government has the power to do whatever I want. We live in a democracy. These are all lies. We don't live in a democracy, and the president can't do whatever he wants. That would be authoritarian, and that would be a dictatorship, yes? Whether it's Trump or it's Biden or Obama. None of them have that power. Now, if we don't learn about this crap, and we don't even know what federalism is, and that's our system of government, then it's easy for them to take it away. Okay? That's why I'm spending time on this, so you guys won't let that happen. All right? Thank you very much. Moving on to the third system, okay? And we used to actually use this one. When we first started our country, look at the boxes. Okay? Our first constitution was called Is it up there? Yeah, the Articles of Confederation. Okay. Right here. Remember this from history last year? Yeah. This is the actual document, the Articles of Confederation. All right. Now, federal systems are independent states that join together for common goals. So, guys, the American Revolution starts in 1775. 1776, we write the Declaration, we break away. During the war in 1781, we write the Articles of Confederation. Okay? Now, we were breaking away from authoritarian government. So when they wrote the first Constitution, they didn't want to give this national government any power because they were suspicious of power in the hands of a small group of people. Yes? So this national government, guys, our first Constitution was a one-branch government, one body. It was a legislative branch. There was no executive. There was no judicial branch. And each state got one representative. So how many people were in our national government? 13. Okay, that's it. And they made all the decisions, but they didn't really have any power to make many decisions. They couldn't tax. Okay, they had to ask states for money. Okay, we were suspicious of power. We just broke away from that. We didn't want to do it again. Now, this did not work for us. Guys, when we broke away, before the Articles of Confederation, so 75, 76, we break away from Britain. So between 76 and 81, we are 13 independent countries. 13 colonies are now 13 countries. Then they signed this Constitution, the Articles. Now they are one country with a national government that is very weak. Now, say we got 13 people in here. Each one of you represent one of the first 13 states. Okay, now Cooper is Virginia. Wilson, Pennsylvania. Now Cooper has really good ports. He's got the Chesapeake Bay. Okay, and Pennsylvania doesn't have good ports. So in order to get ships and supplies into Pennsylvania, he needs to use Cooper's waterway. So Cooper's like, hey, you want to use our waterways, you're going to have to pay for that. Hey, I thought we were the United States. Are we not united? No, we're not united. We're going to fleece our neighbors, okay? So you have all these disputes over borders and finances and navigation rights up rivers and so forth. And it turns into a big fight with these 13 guys in New York. And it's not working. There's like 13 countries pulling at the federal head. And the country was falling apart. So they wrote the new Constitution. Okay? So now, Canada uses this today. You guys know Canada, right? They have provinces, right? You've heard of Quebec. It's not just a city. It's a province. Okay? What do they speak in Quebec? What language? Yeah, they're French. They all speak French. It's the official language of Quebec. But the other provinces speak English. It's a big thing there. Okay? Now, remember how we talked about nationalized health care? I don't know if we got to talk about that. But Canada has nationalized health care from the federal government. So that would make you think that the national government was very strong. But actually, in Canada, all the provinces agreed to do a nationalized health care system. Okay? The states have more say here. Okay? Russia is actually a confederal system, but it doesn't function as well. Okay, basically, Russia has turned into a mafia state under Vladimir Putin. Okay, and he's about to invade the Ukraine. He's got 100,000 troops on the board. So this is going to be the guy. Are we going to go? We're going to have a war with Russia in Eastern Europe? You guys want to go? You want to go defend the Ukrainians? You just want to let them die, get taken over by the Russians. And then if nobody does anything, the Russians continue to build up their forces, and then they decide, hey, why don't we just go ahead and take Poland back as well? Romania. Where do we stop them now? What do they do? Or do we say, hey, you know what? We don't really want to do this. Would you guys be okay with supplying the Ukraine with some weapons to defend themselves? Or do you just want to stay out of it? This is what's happening. Like, you turn on the news right now, this is what everybody's talking about, right? And there's some people that are beating the drums of war. Like, let's go stop the Russians. We don't really, I don't think we want to do that. They have a lot of tanks. Like thousands of tanks. Okay? And in order for us to get tanks over there and have any kind of chance of winning that, would be a massive buildup. I mean, huge. Okay, we're not in a position to do that. Okay? Now, if NATO, and I know you guys studied NATO last semester, if NATO were to get involved, they have a lot of tanks. Maybe not enough. Okay? But that would be different. But NATO is not going to get involved. Okay, so do we punish the Russians for this? Do we do economic sanctions against them? That's more likely what's going to happen. Okay, so that's going to be something really important to pay attention to in the coming days and weeks. Okay. All right, Michael, this is complicated here. All right, so we've got two systems here. Okay, so Britain uses a unitary system, we use a federal system. We're both republics. Okay? So when we look at powers within levels of government, so we were looking at levels of government, now we're looking within the levels. You have two systems, presidential system and a parliamentary system. Okay? With the presidential system, this is what we use. See this? You have three branches of government. Stucky. I know it's early. Here, I'll turn on the light. How's that? Yeah. All right. Seriously, this could be a little bit confusing, all right? What the frickin' heck is wrong with you? All right. So we use this. The legislative and executive branches are separate and independent. All right. When Barack Obama ran for president in 2008, he was a sitting member of the United States Senate. Senate's in the legislative branch. He's running president of the executive branch, yes? What state did he represent in the Senate? Obama? What state? Where's he from? He did grow up in Hawaii, but Illinois. Okay? Obama's represented Illinois in the Senate. Okay? Then he gets elected president. Can he be in the Senate and be president at the same time? No, because they are separate and independent. He had to give up that seat in the Senate. Okay? That's a good story if you want to hear it. What happened when he gave up the Senate seat? Let's talk about it. Okay. 50 states. In 49 of the 50 states, if a senator dies or resigns, the governor of that state gets to appoint a new senator for the remainder of the term. You guys know how long a Senate term is? 6. So the House is 2 years. The U.S. House is 2 years. The Senate is 6. So if Obama leaves and he's got 2 years left on his 6-year term, he goes to be president. The governor of Illinois gets to appoint a new senator. What's interesting is Obama was the only African American in 2008 in the United States Senate. Okay? He's the only African American in there. The governor of Illinois was a guy named Rob Blagojevich. Okay? Blagojevich saw an opportunity to sell that seat to the highest bidder. You ever heard of Jesse Jackson? They looked at Jesse Jackson's son, who's an African American. He's a big beer distributor guy there in Chicago. Guys, Chicago politics is corrupt. You understand? There's a lot of corruption. Right? And so he wanted to appoint a black person to fill that, the seat that Obama had, Well, the FBI gets tipped off that Blagojevich is trying to sell the seat. So they wiretap his phone and they bust him. Now, before he goes to jail, Blagojevich, the governor, he appoints a guy named Burke to fill that seat, who's an African American, for the last 2 years of the Senate's seat. Okay. Blagojevich gets impeached as the governor and then sent to prison. Okay, these are all Democrats. Yes? Guess who pardoned Blagojevich before he left office? Trump did. Trump pardoned this guy in 2019, last year, or 2 years ago. It's kind of fun. Okay. Now, look, he was in prison for like 10 years. Is that long enough? You know what I mean? I just thought it's a good story, right? All right, so, and then actually in 2010, that Senate seat from Illinois, which is one of the bluest, most democratic states of the 50, was won by a Republican, which is crazy. Okay, now he only served 1 term and then he lost to a Democrat, but that was weird. Okay. All right, so the president, now this is another big one here. The president is chosen independently from the legislature. So guys, when we talk about parliamentary systems shortly, who elects the prime minister in a parliamentary system? The parliament. You with me? So in our system, who elects the president? People through what? The Electoral College. Okay? People elect the president, not the legislature. That's important. Okay? And then you can't be one of the other. You can't be in both. Okay? So the U.S. has this presidential system. Now, if you look at these 3 branches, would you say that one of the 3 branches has more power than the other? Or they're equal? Let's take a poll. How many feel like the legislative branch, Congress, is the most powerful? Okay. How many people think the executive, the president, has the most power? How many think the judicial branch, the Supreme Court, has the most power? I'm with you. Okay, listen. The founders wanted the legislative branch to have the most power. They do control the purse. They control the money. Okay, but members of the House, especially, they're up for election every 2 years. Yes. What's the #1 goal of a member of the House? to get reelected. So if you want to get reelected, you don't want to make any really difficult decisions, like cutting the size of government. Because if you cut the U.S. Department of Education, all those people that work for it are going to lose their jobs. And that's going to make you look bad. Because you're causing pain. And members of Congress don't like to cause pain for anybody. Because they can be criticized for it. You follow me? Follow me. Okay? So they abdicate. They give up their power to the president. Everybody knows who the president is. Now, we've talked about the three people that represent us in Washington, D.C., the three names, 2 senators, 1 House member from the 4th District of Kansas. You still don't know their names. Estes in the House, Rand and Marshall in the Senate, right? Okay? Most Kansans, walk down the street, walk down the hallway. Ask people if they know the representatives. Ask the teachers. I bet some of them don't know. So, they want it that way. Everybody knows who the president is. And we can blame the president when things go wrong. Don't look at us. It's his fault. Biden's fault. So they give up their responsibility to the president. Okay? Then you've got these 9 people on the U.S. Supreme Court. Are they elected? No. We don't even get to vote for these people. And how long do they serve? For life. And they get to determine what the other 2, what they do, whether it's constitutional or not. I'm with you. I think the judicial branch is the most powerful. And I'm not sure that's the way the founders wanted it. They wanted the legislative branch. Okay? So, yes, we need to know who Ron Estes is. We need to know who Moran and Marshall are. Okay? As people that live in this state. Okay? Monday, when we get back, we will talk about the parliamentary systems, which are quite a bit more entertaining. Our system's not very entertaining. Have a good weekend.